Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
That's the same thing I was going to say. But if we're allowing ourselves to dream, what would it look like? So we're on. What if you talk current and then you go? Hi. I was just hoping your plane landed. I'm so sorry. I was in the speaker's lounge. We're about to have Mardi. Honor to you. I thought it might be. Hello. My facial recognition. Not great. Hi, Sonja. Yes. Pleasure to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Sorry for not standing. Did you have a good break in there?
All right. Good morning, everybody. Oh, thank you. Sorry. There we go. I'm a little bit short. There we are. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to CWA. My name is Sonja, and I am so excited to get to introduce our panel today. For recording purposes, today is April 10th. It is 10:32 a.m., and this is panel number 18030, titled Pride for All or Pride for None, LGBTQIA+ Rights in 2124. Before we get started, the University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge and knowledges, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in the climate that is inclusive and respectful. So, thank you for that. One other thing I would like to mention just before we go ahead and get started and I introduce our wonderful panelists here, is that we want to be able to have all of you ask questions and get some excellent answers from our experts up here. And we will handle this by reserving the end of the discussion for that Q&A. We're using a note card system. So you should have little pencils and note cards. Feel free to write questions down on those. I promise I can probably read your handwriting, so don't worry about it. And if you do not have one, simply raise your hand to request a note card and pencil. Please do your best, and if you are a student, please note that on your card. That is just so then we can, make sure that student questions get answered. This is a university, so write that on your card. And when you are finished writing down a question, please raise your hand, and one of our wonderful producers around this space will grab that from you. Please make your questions as brief and to the point as possible. That will allow me to make sure that they get the best answer as possible. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. You can find their full bios on the CWA website. If you haven't visited that yet, I recommend you do so. So I'm going to start at the end with Rebecca Buckwalter-Poza, who is an activist and advocate who identifies as an LGBTQ Latina. She provides commentary and perspective on politics, law, and policy for many different types of media. You might have heard her name, related to many different court cases and other awesome work. And you can learn more about that and in that bio online. Mardi Moore has been dedicated to elevating the rights of the LGBTQ+ community at the front lines for over 30 years and currently serves as the executive director of Out Boulder County, which is one of our wonderful local nonprofits that I have been so privileged to work with in the past. So again, recommend looking more into that on the website. And then lastly, Eli Hans, who is an award-winning actor and playwright who is currently, as of this weekend, giving 3 different showings of Out of the Blue, which is thank you, which is a coming-of-age gay story about self-love and acceptance. And he's joining us all the way from Central Mexico to put this on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this weekend at the Dairy Arts Center. And if you would like to learn more, please ask questions about that as well. It looks amazing, honestly. All right, so I will go ahead and hand it over to our panelists.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Mardi Moore. My gender pronouns are she and her. I am the executive director of Out Boulder County, which is an LGBT organization that has been here in your community for 30 years. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary right now. We've come a long way, and there's a long way to go. The title, frankly, is a little bit much. I do not have a crystal ball. I have no idea what's going to happen in 100 years. Eli and I were laughing. We're not sure what we're doing for lunch. So we'll do our best in doing that. But on that, I'll hand to Eli, and then we'll do some introductions and maybe pose a question to one another.
Rebecca, go ahead. Okay. Well, hi, I'm Eli Hans, and my husband Joseph and I came from San Miguel de Allende in central Mexico. We're delighted to be here. And we're here to do the show as a fundraising event for Out Boulder. We're so excited to be able to raise some funds for this gay youth organization. This is part of what the mission is of the show. And I just wanted to say that, like Marty, I have no idea what I'm doing for lunch or tomorrow. So 100 years from now, I am a dreamer, I'm a visionary, so my hopes, I think, are all very similar to all of yours, being humans on this planet, wanting to have peace and love and respect, mutual respect for one another. So we are here to just talk about how that's going to happen. And so now here's Rebecca, and we'll continue.
I'm Rebecca Buckwalter. Oh, is it working? Okay. Rebecca Buckwalter-Poza. My pronouns are she, they, and ella. And I don't know, about 100 years, I made the grave mistake of co-writing a book called 40 More Years, How Democrats Will Rule the Next Generation in 2009. And since then, I've stayed away from that genre of prognostication. But because there are so many threatening things, and we'll have to talk about those, I'd like to start with something more positive, which is to say, even 20 years ago, I could not have imagined the privilege of living the out, open, and full life that I am. I grew up in North Carolina. I am a second-generation Latina, and I've run into the hard things, but I have just seen more progress in just, say, 20 years than I could ever have imagined, and I'm so grateful for it, and glad we'll get to talk about the whole arc.
I would follow up on that, Rebecca. One of the things that Eli said is that we have a youth program. And as Kyle, who's here in the audience today, and I have talked about the setbacks that are headed our way, that the youth of today, they've always known gay marriage, right? We, you know, as a 61-year-old dyke, I mean, I have been married and had my money sent back to me. And so I've never gotten a good gay divorce. I don't know about anybody else in this room, but it's never really worked out. And but the youth of today don't know that. And as I think about, you know, we're in this gigantic hall, which I understand the Onion guy didn't even fill, but the reality of the apathy for the LGBTQ rights movement right now is frightening. If you're not gay, you're not paying attention. If you probably don't know somebody trans. And if you do, you haven't been able to ask a question that make you understand their heart and their head. And so, you know, as we head into an election year, and as I was saying to Eli, you know, we're not a political movement. They've made us a political movement. We're a movement that wants to be happy to live our lives the way we see fit in an open society. And every time we make progress in that direction, the far right, the religious right, the now MAGA movement throws up something to make us be the, they used to call it the wedge issue. I don't know what they call it now. And so then we're back under attack. And with the apathy that it's like, oh, we have gay marriage, have to fundraise because I run an organization, finding money to fight these ballot initiatives that are headed our way, which I'll quit talking soon, but talk more about later. That's going to be tough work. And I think the other thing is with the youth of today, when I talk to parents, my kids are old actually. When I talk to parents who have kids in school today, they're like, they're so great. They have friends who are trans. They don't argue about they not being grammatically correct. They don't care if somebody who identifies as a boy is wearing a dress to school. These are not their issues. And yet it's the world they're living in and the setbacks we're trying to create for them. So I think we have to engage the youth. I've never been that person who thought the youth were the solution. As a 61-year-old, I'm pretty sure they are.
Well, I'm a gay Mexican Polish Jew. And I didn't know there was anything wrong with that when I was growing up. Well, the gay part I needed to hide. But when I moved to the States when I was 14, it became really apparent that those four things were not going to be okay in this country. And what I think really lies underneath all of this, if I may say, is a really strong sense of healing that can come from self-love, self-acceptance. I think we need to go there first. And I wanted to share a story with you. About 30 years ago or so, I was having an existential moment of angst, trying to figure out, who am I? What am I doing on this planet? What is my purpose? Can anybody relate to those questions? Well, and then I had what I came to call my Oprah moment, because I was sitting at a cafe when all of a sudden I had this light come, and I was having a conversation with who turned out to be a black woman in the sky who looked a lot like Oprah. And I said, why am I here? And what I heard was, you are here to fully express who you came here to be. And I thought, oh, okay, thanks. And then I heard her say, no, you didn't hear what I said. You fully express who you came here to be. That means using all of your gifts and all of your talents and all of your colors and all of your expression in this world without any shame or guilt or holding back. And I thought, oh, that kind of fully. And my life changed after that moment. It really did. Because I learned little by little how to truly embrace who I am as a gay Mexican Polish Jew with all kinds of other things to share with the world. And I feel that if we all kind of had that approach about sharing who we are with the world and accept and love ourselves first, then in speaking about 100 years from now, I don't want to see like gay pride festivals 100 years from now. I want to see human pride festivals. And what I would like to have happen, thank you. What I'd like to have happen is you just need to agree to 3 little things to participate in the human, great. You need to be kind, you need to be loving, and you need to be respectful during that Human Pride Festival. And just approach everyone you see as if they were like your long-lost friend that you haven't seen in such a long time, and be happy to rejoice. We are on this planet together. And I really feel that, you've noticed how LGBTQ, all those initials just keep growing and growing. I mean, in the 50s, there wasn't probably even an L or a G, right? And now it's just growing. Well, I think we need to get rid of all those things and just make it human. We are here to be humans together on this planet. And I think that all of the challenges that we're having right now is about getting to the core of that. What does it mean to really love and accept ourselves?
I too dream of a post-alphabet future, but am also taken back to remembering working with a mentor in democratic politics who wanted to write a book about post-racial America. And this was after the first election of President Obama, whose campaign I worked on. And I just imagine, what if we'd written that book? We look around every day now, and this isn't a post-racial America. And we're neither a post-alphabet America nor a post-alphabet world, with Uganda's courts upholding rulings, or rather upholding laws that not only criminalize but make possible death sentences for being gay. And there are many currents of progress, and I will pivot, I promise, to focus on those, but I think that Marty and Eli have touched on the 2 concepts that I most wanted to talk about. As a kid, I never could have imagined the power of storytelling, of visibility. I'm a writer first, a lawyer second. I can't help with your gay divorce, I'm sorry. But one of the most powerful things from a legal mind that I ever heard on the topic was from the late Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. And she said, visibility is the first thing. It's about becoming visible and then doing it well. And then everything else follows. And so I think that I was, as many people can probably relate to, I always told myself, well, I'm not going to come out. It would really upset everyone. It'd just be such an imposition and very inconvenient, and I'll wait. And only 20 years after coming out can I appreciate how significant it is simply to be out and to be visible and to be a resource, and to be part of our community. And so I don't want to give up our community. I want a human pride festival, but I also want the LGBTQIA+, including Two-Spirit as well, community to retain the memory of its richness, and we're unique. I could geek out on the law, but we are a group of people unlike pretty much any other, which has created thorny problems for the realization of our rights, where is being queer defined by an act we take? Is it defined by a quality we innately have that can't be changed? Should it be like race, etc.? So I'll plant that seed, and from there I want to say the thing I would love to hear my co-panelists talk about is dignity. That's the idea that underlies all of the major Supreme Court gay rights decisions in the United States. And last month, the High Court in Sapporo in Japan, when ruling for same-sex marriage, essentially, also cited human dignity. And I think at its core, it's a simple idea, and when we can get better at talking about that, we can build the bridges and get to the idea that it is simply human dignity that protects all of us under all of these umbrellas. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I don't spend a lot of time thinking about dignity, but I was going through, which is interesting, right? And thanks for pointing out the big win in Japan. As you talked about storytelling, I often go there and trying to put my thoughts together and examples of it because I find definitions lacking, but the application of those concepts always rings true. So when I think about dignity, I think about 2 7th grade boys that were being bullied in Boulder high schools last year because their classmates had lack of dignity for who they were and how they expressed themselves, and how the systems that we had in place, or the people in charge of the systems, didn't uphold individual dignity. And you can put all the policies in the world, you can put them all in place, you can pass all the laws you want, but people don't necessarily follow them. And so I think about that when I think about dignity. I think about one of the things that's going to be happening in Boulder County. I had a meeting yesterday with a big surgical company, the largest provider of trans surgeries in the world. And they're coming to Boulder. Wow. And they're already starting to take clients. And as I think about that, I think about safety. Because people don't grant people dignity nor respect. They look at somebody, they think they're different, they become afraid, they become angry, and you're taking mine, and don't you know the rules of society, you're breaking them. And so as great of news as it is, Trinidad was one of the first hub of transgender surgeries in the United States, which has been shut down for a few years, and now Boulder is going to become that place, which I think is amazing. But the powers that be are like, we probably shouldn't talk about it, right? Because there's going to be pushback around that. Why would we want to celebrate this? And I'm in the other camp, which is everybody deserves dignity, everybody gets free expression, and everybody gets to be who they are, and do whatever is medically necessary to make that true. And how do we as a community embrace that and protect people in all of that? And so, and one thing, as you started talking about court cases, one of our big loves in the city of Boulder is Gene Dabowski, who argued Amendment 2 in front of the Supreme Court in 1992, because Colorado became known as the hate state long before your home state of North Carolina started their bathroom bills.
HB 2.
Yeah. And so we know the importance of those rulings and pay attention to them. And I think one of the concerns in thinking about, and then I'll ask Eli to speak to dignity, but follow this train of thought. One of the realities is we talk about marriage being this great win. Well, we had Roe versus Wade for a very long time, 49 years, I think, if my math is correct. We missed the 50th anniversary celebration, I think. And then we have the Obergefell ruling which is recent, I think 2018, but time's weird since COVID. Bill Clinton, in his great compromises, throwing the gays under the bus from Don't Ask, Don't Tell to the Defense of Marriage Act. No friend of the gays, even though, rest in peace, David Mixner did his best. We have in the state of Colorado and across 30 or more states in the United States, Defense of Marriage Acts, which are baked into our state constitutions, that say that marriage is only between one man and one woman. Colorado has that. And because of the federal ruling, the Supreme Court ruling in Obergefell, we can get, gays and lesbians can get married, same gender people can get married in our state. That can be thrown out in a heartbeat. There's nothing that's been granted cert that we're aware of. I mean, I'm not the lawyer, and please correct me, but nothing that we're aware of that has granted cert that will get that case to Clarence Thomas and his ilk to remove marriage. But as we see the religious right being ignited once again, our dignity is in question. Eli?
Yeah. Oh, that makes me sad as a human. You know, we had made so many strides, like you said, 20 years ago. I would have never imagined that I could be legally married to my amazing husband. That is incredible how far we've come. And yet, of course, it's scary. It's like a pendulum that swings back from one extreme to the other, that now all those advances are being threatened. Of course, we all deserve to have recognition and human dignity. I mean, it's the essence. It's just like a gift that's inherent as a human. So what is going on? And my question to you and to all of you is, what shift needs to happen in our consciousness to be able to really just embrace each other and understand that humanity comes in all these different shapes and colors? We're not, I mean, what are we different from, supposedly? We're not different. We are part of the colors and the spectrum of humanity. So my question is, what will it take for our consciousness to be able to expand and embrace that? Do we need to have some major life-threatening event happen on the planet until we finally start pulling together? Or what needs to happen?
COVID didn't work out so well in that.
Yeah, I mean, when COVID came, I thought, finally, something that's going to pull us all together. And the minute it was safe, bam, we just went back to swinging the other way, you know? What I do know about a pendulum is that it does continue to swing. So at some point after this moment in history passes, we're going to start swinging in the other direction again. And being the dreamer that I am and the idealist that I am, I do see that at some point in our humanity, we're going to achieve that kind of balance and that embracing all those, colors in our humanity. I just can't understand how anyone else could be so extreme, because I'm so in the middle and I'm so embracing by nature. So what do you think needs to happen in this world for us to begin to really embrace our humanity?
All right, yeah, for me, it is dignity. It is, of course, I'm sorry. It is dignity. That is the thing that holds together all of the concepts. And we see what a powerful concept it is, because this is privacy, this is liberty, this is bodily autonomy. And so people who don't want to wear masks but do want to regulate pregnancy, and we have all these tensions, but that's how we know it's powerful, that is the concept behind the opposing forces. So I think what needs to happen is we need to find a way to reach a united understanding of dignity, and to find better ways of talking about it than even say the word dignity, which is much loftier than what it stands for, what it signifies, which is simply the right to live your life without interference, to be protected, to have a negative right that you can be free of someone interfering versus, and this is where I'll go wonky again, but the First Amendment, which I think right now there's a crusade to revise the First Amendment to create a positive right to discriminate instead of understanding it as what it's always stood for, which is the negative right to be free of interference in the practice of religion and free speech and making private decisions. And actually, I think maybe the first major gay rights case the Supreme Court decided in 1957, 1 v. Olson, was about a gay magazine that had been labeled obscene. And the Ninth Circuit targeted it under the same laws that are now being revived around sending contraceptives and abortion medication through the mail, the Comstock laws. So these are all tied together, and when we can make that case and talk about these things in relation to one another, I think we succeed at fostering sort of a more common ground and more potential, hopefully, for movement. But that is, I think, an important point that even within the LGBTQ community, among activists, we don't link reproductive justice and reproductive health with gay and trans and queer rights as often as we should. And these are all things I would also like to be better at speaking out, but that I think we all should be in conversation and developing better ways to link things.
I love that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about current, what I know about current, and as I kind of keep an eye on a clock, so then we can talk about future and imagining and leave in a positive space maybe for today, which would be great. Maybe. So as you were talking about the reproductive rights movement, the justice movement, here in the state of Colorado, there is a ballot initiative that I have signed and others, and our organization, Boulder County, is partnering with Cobalt any way we can to collect those signatures to keep abortion safe and legal in our state. And we have worked in coalition with them on a variety of things. And one of my old bosses, she's not that old, but Ray Carey from the national, from the task force, the LGBTQ task force, when I started working for her, she was clear with all of us that our rights are connected. And she was the one national leader that I could look to and know that that's the right thing to do, along with racial justice. And so, you know, I think that for the average person and just thinking about it, when we end up with the alphabet soup of LGBTQ plus and everything, the asterisks with all that follows in it, we think about one group of people. Now, for those of us who are working in the movement, we know there are 1 trillion different people that are covered by those letters. And as a leader of a community center with a strong advocacy and education arm, programming for all of the people within our alphabet is impossible. There aren't enough resources in the world to be able to do that. So you prioritize. You prioritize for those who are the most discriminated against, the most historically excluded, and those that are facing the most pain in current society, which is what we do in our programming. And then we continue to work to change the laws that have created that discrimination. And one of the things that makes me absolutely nuts right now is as we talk about mental health. And we don't talk about the impacts of long-term discrimination. I was in a conversation yesterday with a 60-year-old gay man who's visiting from New York City. And as we were sitting having lunch, and he had talked to some youth in one of the local middle schools, he was sharing that experience, and we started sharing stories. Well, he had to experience conversion therapy. Now, this is an example of a human who's walking the earth to your point. Like, how do we get to that point? There's only so much damage a human being can take before it is ingrained, right? So his mother had the nerve to say to him, I should have killed you because you're an abomination. Right? So to have somebody say, hey, then you need to be happy and you need to what's wrong with you? Those things, and then I shared that my mom spent her whole life teaching me how to walk like a girl and to take my hands out of my pockets. I'm 61 years old. Should I be talking about that today? No. Right? And so how do we, so we all come with different baggage, but it's not, and the psychiatrists and I was born in 62. It was 72, I think, before they took me out of the DSM that I was mentally ill. Trans people are still locked up in that battle. And so we're fighting systems everywhere we can to stop the mental health issues that our community faces, not because we're deficient, but because of decades and centuries of violence and vile. And here we are again. So one of the things that Boulder County does, and there's been some wins around the country. So let me start with a little bit of positive. In West Virginia and in Kentucky, not one anti-trans bill passed this year. That's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Colorado and California in the national movement are known what's called of the shield states. Like if something bad happens in Colorado, I bet Kansas will be worse, right? If something bad happens in California, the West Coast is gone, the mountain states. So here we are in a shield state. I've already mentioned we had Amendment 2 where neighbors voted against their gay neighbor to say you don't get the same rights as me. That wasn't that long ago, 1992. And now this year, we have 4 different measures that are waiting for the Colorado Supreme Court to rule on whether they're single subject, not on whether they're right or wrong or constitutional, on whether they're a single subject issue. And then we all get to vote on it in November. And these issues include no trans girls in sports. We know a little 7-year-old trans kid who loves soccer. Really? Talk about lack of dignity. There's another one I love this one. Parental notification of gender incongruence. As a little tomboy, they would have been calling my mom every day. And this is the janitor can report, a volunteer, a contractor. They have 48 hours to tell your parent. There's another one that's being argued that would let parents know what library book a kid checks out. And we can go on down the line. Until April 17th, we won't know what the title board is done with. There's a couple under appeal. They will go to the Supreme Court, Colorado Supreme Court, and then if they pass through there, ballot signatures will begin being collected. This is a state that is supposedly purple. This is a state that has non-discrimination laws that include trans people. This is a state that allows trans folks to be in sports. Even the NCAA allows that, which I hear is up for debate these days based upon the ruling from another national group 3 days ago. So we are under assault. We'll talk about, poor mental health. Oh, they're drinking too much. I can't believe the gays smoke. I mean, give me a break. The pressure is intense. And then you show up, you be your best self, you be polite, and then it becomes our job to change hearts and minds. I just fell off my soapbox. Eli?
Really quick, I'm actually going to pivot to one of our questions because you just led perfectly into it, which is, do you think, all of our panelists, do you think that we can change people's negative views via education, or does it take them actually just having experiences with the LGBTQ plus community?
It's both. People's psyche, minds work different ways. I have an example. I went to Modus's Theater's transformative storytelling. And it's people just tell their stories. And it's all these trans folks telling these great stories. And including your boss, Morgan has a great story. And after the performance at E-Town that day, and they were doing questions and answers, there was a guy I didn't know, an older white man in the crowd, who raised his hand and said, you know, I thought I really got it in my head, but until I heard these stories, I didn't get it in my heart. And so I think education does work, but I also think it's amazing how many parents with trans kids all of a sudden now are like, oh, hello, it's our movement we're in. And so you don't really stand up for people until you're directly impacted. So I think it's both and.
Do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is nothing that substitutes for the experience of knowing another human being and learning that they belong to this community. It takes dissolving the us and them and just we. But people are also complicated. So one of the things I think is most important that I try to bring to my work, even though I'm a lawyer, is creativity and thinking about how to reach people. One example for me, the person who raised me for the first 3 years of my life, my grandmother, who's a wonderful, loving woman, and when my cousin Hernan came out as gay 30 years before I did, in the midst of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, the height, she accepted him, she loved him. She spent her time, she'd immigrated from Colombia in 1954, and when she retired, her organization of choice to volunteer was an AIDS hotline. And she had a job applicant come in, and she didn't graduate high school, she didn't go to college, but one day she had a job applicant come in who didn't sit down and just said, well, I don't know why I'm here, I don't know why I'm gonna bother, because here's the thing, my name's actually Raquel, and in a couple of weeks I'm gonna start wearing wigs and dresses. And my grandmother, who just thought, well, how amazing that this person who's college educated and professional and all these things is, you know, humbling themselves before me, she said, Raquel, please sit down. And that was the grandmother that I knew. And we had one of these coded conversations that I think many folks whose families are bicultural or otherwise might understand, where I thought we'd had the conversation and that she understood that I'm gay. And it turned out we hadn't, and she didn't. And when I came out to her, my mother decided she would do this on my behalf. Don't recommend it. My grandmother refused to be under the same roof with me. She violently rejected me. And it was so impossible to reconcile everything I knew of her for her entire lifetime, and then up until that moment. And yet I accepted that, okay? And I continued. There were drunk dials. It was awful. But the most curious thing happened, and I just hung in there. I chose to hang on to the Nana that I'd known. On her deathbed, she asked me for forgiveness. The word she used was misericordia, which I'd never heard. A beautiful word, something closer to clemency, I think. But she was there, and I went when we knew she was very close to dying. And the whole first day I was there, she was sort of vague and sort of rambling, and I was looking at my mom, I was looking at my sister, and I'm like, no, this is not a Disney movie. That's not what's happening here. And then the next day, I looked at them again, and said, all right, well, let's see. And I said, Nana, and I repeated to her the 3 things that she'd always said to me when she would call me. She'd say, you know that I love you, you know that it's wrong, but you know that I love you anyway, right? Some version of that. And I'd finally told her one night, Nana, no, when you say that, I don't know that you love me anyway. And so I took her in my arms and I said, Nana, I know you love me. I have always loved you.
everything is going to be okay. And she settled down. People are complicated, and this is not to take away from the excellent point Marty makes about the burden we bear, the burden of educating, the burden of visibility even, of needing to represent and all of that, but I can only say that as difficult as it is, and this emotional labor, or anything else you want to call it, it is so worthwhile and so, so important.
Thanks so much for sharing that story. I think it's so important to really share our stories in a vulnerable, authentic way, to share our humanity with others. Your story really touched me about your grandma. I have a brother who is older than me who had always been very homophobic as I was growing up, typical brother beating me up and teasing me and all those kinds of things. And when Joseph, my husband, and I got together, he had a lot of reactions to it. And when we decided to get married, we invited him to the wedding, and I didn't know if he was coming or not. And he was vehemently opposed, almost violent with both of us beforehand. And the day before, he said, okay, I'm coming to your event. So we had a beautiful wedding. This wasn't legal yet, but it was a beautiful celebration. And the weird thing is that as I was facing Joseph during the vows, my brother was sitting directly behind him. And I was so uncomfortable. And yet, this is what happened. At the end of the ceremony, he says, I need to talk to both of you. I'm going to get emotional here, and I thought, oh, God, here it comes. And he says, I am so sorry. I've been so wrong. I can see how much you love each other. I can see how everyone here loves and accepts you, and I'm the one that's had the problem. Will you please forgive me? And at that moment, somebody walked by and took a picture of the three of us. So I have that moment to capture that moment. And so in answer to that question, I think that having a real human emotional connection is what really helps to transform people. I just want to add one more thing. I've had an incredible privilege to share my story through the show that we're here to do out of the blue. It's a coming of age story. Being raised as a gay kid in a Mexican Jewish community in Mexico City. And when the show is over, a large part of the audience doesn't want to leave, so we've had these talkbacks afterwards. And what I love, love, love is that the typical comment is, though this story is about you and your life story, the themes are so universal about wanting to be loved, about feeling different in some way or broken in some way, and every human being can relate to those themes. But when they see the struggles that I went through just trying to learn to love and accept myself as a gay human, it opens up a lot of hearts and a lot of people's. And actually, that's one of the reasons why we're here, because Bob and Katie Yates that are sitting there were in the audience, and they felt something, said, we got to bring this to Boulder. But it's not about the show. It's about what happens when we share from a very vulnerable, authentic place who we are with others. And that's about visibility, but from a real place of groundedness, People get it. And my husband likes to hold hands a lot when we're walking in public in central Mexico. And having been raised in Mexico, having to hide it, it's always so difficult for me, fearing that someone will come and attack us or something. But he says to me, if we don't do this, how are they going to see that this exists? So we have to have dignity, and we have to be brave, and we have to just walk downtown holding hands so that other humans can see that this exists. It takes courage. But that's how we open hearts, and that's how transformation begins.
I think we've answered one of the questions, but I want to make sure if any of you have further thoughts on it. We got a question, can you speak to the power of the arts in achieving that human dignity in the LGBTQ plus community? And I think the arts. And I think with Modus's transformative stories, which you mentioned, Marty, and then Out of the Blue, obviously, which Eli is so wonderful to give to us, but also with the creativity that you kind of mentioned in your story, Rebecca. Did any of you have anything to add on to that?
So what I was about to voice was just, and this is both in relation to that and forward-looking, part of the work of visibility, of storytelling, of sharing, there is tremendous internalized loathing and homophobia and transphobia still that we need to deal with. I think so far today we've talked a lot about ourselves in relation to other people, but Marty, you also touched on trauma and discrimination and what the long-term effects are. And I think that art is an unparalleled way to reconcile the self, to address these internalized tropes, narratives, beliefs, feelings that in everyday life we might not be called upon to recognize as such. So that is the final piece of my thoughts on those topics.
We actually also just got a question from a student, and this might touch on what you're about to say, Marty, but please feel free to continue as well. The portrayal of LGBTQIA plus people in pop culture and in movies, TV shows, right, is often forced and feels very stereotypical. How do we make fuller representations that have our true human dignity possible?
You need to become a director and be able to fundraise, because if you don't have the control of the full art, it's given to us.
You write your own show.
Yeah. And, boycotting or, I'm thinking of Jack from Will and Grace. I mean, how stereotypical. But also it started conversations at my house that, because my mom liked Jack, right? He was like an approachable, weird character. And so, there's a big viewing audience, but if we want to be true, and, I would love to watch more queer movies. I would love it. More queer themed pieces. I have to always go back to Go Fish. I mean, that's how old I am, right? But so you have to own it. You have to be successful in your craft, and then you have to figure out how to play the game, whether you like the game or not. And as I say that, one of the things, I'm going to look to the future real quick. I was that little dyke with a bow tie dancing at tracks in the 80s and thought that I understood how the world was going to change. I was at Occupy Wall Street in whatever years those were, 2012, and I thought finally we were going to bring the man down. That's the only time I think in my life that I actually thought a revolution was possible, to move away from what wasn't working to something that might work. And we saw how well that went. And so here towards the end of my career and putting all those thoughts together and looking back at the successes of our LGBTQ movement, there have been incremental gains. And so as I do my work, I think of it incrementally. I also, and some of those pieces are hard to put in place. So one of the realities of the continued discrimination that LGBT people face is the lack of data surrounding us. And I hate to get too granular on this, but the federal government doesn't count us in the census. They don't count us except in 3 of the CDC surveys that they do, BRFUS, Healthy Kids Colorado, and something to do with pregnancy, but somehow we're counted.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So if you're married as a gay person, they don't count you as a married couple?
They'll take your money, I understand, at the IRS as such. But you're not, I don't know, I've not been married when the census comes out.
I'm still not handling your marriage or divorce. I don't care how nicely you ask. So, yeah, no, I'm. There was something that went straight through my head. What was it? Oh yeah, something very simple, and I just want to take a moment to try and be inclusive. I realize we may have cis and straight audience members. I hope we do. It happens in the best of families, after all. What matters, one thing that really matters, is how we spend our time and energy and, capitalism, et cetera, our money. So support queer storytelling, support trans artists, support not just in June, not just during Pride Month, but find this art, seek it for yourself, share it with others, and be willing to step up yourself. I started a group after the 2016 election in Washington. We started as Women Crush Wednesday, and thanks to smarter, more evolved people than me, I improved and it improved. We're now We Crush Wednesday to be more inclusive, and it became more than 1,000 people in DC, Maryland, and Virginia who would come in on the last Wednesday of each month. And I started to get more involved with other organizations and other promoters, and there was an opportunity. We have Story District in DC, which is sort of like the Moth, and they were specifically looking for LGBTQ Latinos for a show called Queer Cuentos. And so I posted everywhere on Facebook, okay guys, all 1,000 of you, please, if you're interested, if you're eligible, go out, audition. And then I thought, well, crap, I've got to put my money where my mouth is. So I went, and I said, okay, I'm showing up. I am showing up for my community. I'm showing up. And then, damn it, they picked me. So I found myself telling this story, and it resonated. And they asked me to come back for Outspoken, for the Pride show. And so here's this wonk lawyer, writer, I'm not in the arts. I try to bring creativity to what I do, but I was willing to step up and show up. And that's what I think we all need to do for one another, whether we're part of the community or an ally to it, or simply all part of the human community.
And we have time for you to perform your story now.
Yeah. Is there more questions?
Yes, so many. I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit here. We got another student question that asked, does religion and spirituality tend to benefit or harm equity in your eyes?
Well, I think of religion and spirituality as two very different things. Obviously, I think that the very conservative viewpoints is definitely harming all the advances that we've had. Spirituality to me is just a natural personal connection that we have to spirit or to whatever, we call the God of our understanding, which to me is all about expansion and inclusivity and love and growth and all that. So my answer would be to create our own, to focus on our own beliefs and let that grow. And I do want to say, I'm going to sneak this in because it's one of the concerns that I have when you mentioned, Marty, that some of the youth today don't know this world without gay marriage. What I'm concerned about is what all of a sudden this new messaging about no, we're taking your rights away and things that they haven't known, what that does to their spirit, how that breaks their spirit. And I mean, they grew up in a world where it was okay, and all of a sudden we're being told, no, you're not good enough, you don't deserve it. What does that do to break the human spirit? So what I would like to say about that is that to continue to support youth and anyone else that's hearing these negative messages with continuing to build their self-love, their self-awareness, no matter what's going out here and all the noise up here, to just bring their focus back to their center where they can connect to their own truth, which to me is what spirituality is about.
Well, I'm a sort of improbable vehicle for it, but I'm Catholic. I chose to be baptized and confirmed at the age of 27 when I was in law school to become a godmother. My joke is, well, I know God exists because we didn't know I was a lesbian. They didn't know my godchild belonged to our community either. So, I mean, that's kind of all the proof you need. But I had a very serious discussion with the priest who taught the rite of Christian initiation for adults, the course that I went through to be baptized and confirmed, because I knew that the priest could be excommunicated for confirming me. Not for baptizing, that washes your sins away, but you can't confirm a gay person who doesn't intend to cease and desist. And so I came out to him, and he shared with me a beautiful concept that cemented everything that had drawn me to God since I was a child, to religion. He introduced me to the idea of the primacy of conscience, which is to say, I can enjoy all of the really fundamental good things about Catholicism, concern about charity, generosity, poverty, how we treat one another. Some of the things that Pope Francis has brought the church a little forward into the future on. And I can assert primacy of conscience when there are policies that I disagree with. I've since ended up in Jesuit hospitals and gotten a priest sent my way and threw up my primacy of conscience card, and they love it. They won't have a conversation about it. But my experiences joining the Catholic Church, becoming a godmother, all of these things, as in all else, there is room, hopefully, where you have a group of people who care about humanity, and that is sort of the essence of spirituality and religion to me.
Awesome. All right, we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to maybe finish us off, but we'll see if we can fit in another question. How do we engage the youth people to get involved in politics, either via voting or taking action in different ways?
Well, everyone should look up LPAC. It's this organization that I'm on the board. Yep. So
What
my
is it again?
confession.
LPAC.
So LPAC, it's an example of how to get involved. We are the only organization in the United States dedicated to elevating and supporting queer women in politics, including trans women, including gender nonconforming and non-binary people who are running for office. And we have pivoted to focus on state races, on state legislatures, and support these candidates. And it is a joy to do that work with them, and there are so many other fantastic organizations doing similar work. And I think that seeking them out and also thinking about what each of us can do to promote visibility, because that's to plant the idea that it's possible to be queer, to be open, to be living an out life, and to run for office. Share the stories. There's West Virginia has one of the most remarkable elected trans officials in the United States, and she has a fantastic Instagram feed. And these are the little things that we can do to amplify these messages, to share them, and also to share with people who I'd love to think that, kids have grown up and they've never not known gay marriage, but there are a lot of places where that's still not the reality you live day to day.
Yeah.
And for all its evils, social media offers us opportunities to share these important examples of the life you can make for yourself. As improbable as you might think it was, which is how I tried to convince myself I couldn't be gay when I was a child. I said, it's statistically improbable. So reaching out to all those bow tie wearing, statistically improbable, wonky kids, but putting things out there for other people, sharing, being willing to be vulnerable. These things are all important. And also, I would encourage people, if we're concerned about LGBT representation in office, some of the most important races are the very local ones. My favorite LPAC candidate of the past few years, her name is Ashley Slade, was the star quarterback in her small town in Massachusetts, and then came home after college, I think, and became the town's pharmacist and went through her transition very publicly.
Wow.
And is a libertarian. So, but speaking with her and just hearing about, I mean, the effect that had, it was one of the most beautiful stories I heard. And there's a great photo somewhere of her. She said, I like to make people fly. So like Peter Pan style, lift you up and fly, because she was a star quarterback. So, but local races, there is no office that's too small. And especially for LGBT people, I think it's critical to get involved where you can, as soon as you can.
Thank you. And I would add that to that question, it's a great question, like how do we get people to vote? So one of the things that Outboulder County is doing, and there's a sign up on outboulder.org, I think probably on our main page or in our blog, we're bringing Dave Fleischer to town, who worked at the LA LGBT Center, and who was the leader in thought. His thought on persuasion is in Scientific magazine. Like, this is like thought out how to change somebody's mind. And it's called Deep Canvassing. And if you're available, there's a Zoom call that's coming up. I can't remember the date right now. And then in person on April 27th and 28th, we'll be training people. We have about 40 folks signed up right now. It's the long game. And, no seat is too small. The people who don't like LGBTQ people and who are organized are coming for school districts. So the work that we're doing right now around this deep canvassing is going to have its largest impact in 2025. And Outboulder County is working with a number of foundations and education groups right now to identify candidates throughout the state of Colorado, and to get them engaged in paying attention to school board, have them engaged in learning about and seeking out folks who would run for office who believe in the dignity of all.
Well, I'm not a very political person. I'm not an activist, but I do know that one of the most important things, inherent rights that we all have as humans, is our voice, and that we all matter. And I think that it's important that we all show up and vote, because what we have to say and what we believe in matters. It can make a huge difference. So if you're young and you just turned 18, get out there.
Wonderful. We have about 3 minutes. Are there any final statements any of the three of you would like to make to our audience today?
I could make one. The binary is dying, so just get comfortable with that. And so that's really, as I think about the next 100 years, the only thing that I can really prognosticate is that the they pronoun will be very common. 60% of the youth we serve, and we serve about 500 unduplicated youth each year, identify as they, them. If you're working in an organization that takes applications for jobs, time to get with it. Start adding pronouns, including letting people self-identify on that. And I think that's the one thing that we know is true. I think the other thing, in talking with some of the national leaders, is that there are a lot of groups like HRC, which does a great job in DC, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, which does a great job in small races throughout the country, and but mostly political policy kind of work on both of those ends. After COVID, they're all looking to figure out how they need to be providing services to the community. I think that my organization is in a unique place because we provide services to the community, and we're doing education and advocacy, passing laws, having conversations with government officials to get things changed. And so I think you're going to see more of a model of a community center with these other arms than you're going to see a broken Congress. I'm not sure what HRC is doing with their time, frankly. I mean, nothing's moving. So what do you do in DC when the federal system is broken? So those are two changes I think are coming our way.
be vigilant, be caring, be kind. I'm glad we didn't dive deeply into it, but you talked a little bit about the precarity of the rights of the LGBT community in the United States right now, and they are precarious. Congress passed the Respect for Marriage Act, and that's great, but if the Supreme Court overturns Obergefell, we lose almost everything. We didn't win everything with Obergefell, but we could lose just about everything with a ruling the other way. And I think maybe Gen Z doesn't need the instruction, but I would encourage everyone to be active, to be curious, to be willing to be wrong, to be willing to ask, what are your preferred pronouns? To understand you might slip up, and to just engage.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today and joining us. Thank you both. You're just wonderful, wonderful. And yeah, if you'd like to see a beautiful gay storyline, hope to see you at the dairy this weekend. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you all.
Everyone, please applaud for our beautiful panelists here today.
It was a pleasure.
Well, you're stuck with me now. I'm your conference buddies.
Are you staying in town?